Are we doing well in our relations with our neighbors, or are we not doing so well? And if we are not doing so well, why do you think is that in your view? And if we are doing well, why do you think is that the case?
As currently, sir, the High Court had permitted the Archaeological Survey of India to conduct surveys across the structures of the Gyanvapi Mosque to find the essential religious elements of the place. There is also rise of other small powers like Japan, Iran, that also now hold sway in various global geopolitics.
India should quietly begin a dialogue with some figures in the opposition as well to plan for the day that politics changes in Bangladesh as it can in a democratic country.
So one specific injunction was with respect to the Ram Janmabhoomi issue. Secondly, sir, the Allahabad High Court recently brought a specific interpretation to the Places of Worship Act.
I was looking at your form and I was struck by this, your work as Legislative Assistant to Member of Parliament, LAMP Fellow. So LAMP Fellow क्या होते हैं और क्या काम आपने किया बताइएगा जरा, because कहाँ लखनऊ में in the Legislative Assembly बताइए.
So basically, LAMP Fellowship sir एक fellowship program है which is conducted by the PRS Legislative Research, wherein 50 fellows are allotted to member of parliaments on an annual basis, and they're selected through a meritocratic process. Sir, as a fellow, I was allotted to a member of parliament where I was responsible to undertake his entire parliamentary activities, ranging from drafting his private member bills to creating the drafts for the question hours, the 0 hours, managing some of his constituency-related issues like streamlining the Disha committee meetings, implementation of the MP lad schemes, among others, sir.
Oh, wonderful. So like the staff officers, the US Congress and US something.
Yes, sir, exactly.
Wonderful. So you must have attended many parliament sessions also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So please tell us of a memorable debate that you have watched in parliament.
Sir, it was during my tenureship in the fellowship that Article 370 was abrogated in 2019. That was a memorable debate. Secondly, sir, it was the same year when the Citizenship Amendment Act was also passed in the parliament, which was a very controversial issue at the time.
So you were in the Lok Sabha or Raj Sabha? In the Lok Sabha.
Sir, in the Lok Sabha. In the Lok Sabha, sir.
Okay. Why do you want to join the government?
So firstly, for the reason because by working with the government, I would be able to bring the maximum impact in their lives of the people through a very direct possible way. Secondly, sir, the work of the government is very diverse. The profile of a civil service is very diverse, working from economic space to that of cultural, among others. So that is why I want to especially join the civil services.
Give me 2 arguments for and against the 2 sides in this Gyanvapi Mosque issue. एक तरफ से 2 argument दीजिए और दूसरी तरफ 2 argument दीजिए.
So vis-a-vis the arguments from the side of the plaintiffs, that is the argument by the Hindu priests, their essential argument is that the title of the Gyanvapi Mosque essentially is of the Hindu religious character, which is currently pending in the Varanasi District Court. Because historically it is a proven fact that there was the initial Vishweshwara temple that was erased in the Aurangzeb's reign. Secondly, sir, based on this, they claim that the cultural ethos of that specific land should be rejuvenated because these are some of the only pure cultural sites that should be revered. If I have to speak of the argument against, sir, legally, sir, we have what is called as the Places of Worship Act 1992, wherein our parliament has codified that except for the current, the erstwhile Ram Janmabhoomi disputes, all the other religious structures and institutions should remain of the same character as they were after 1947. So from that logic, sir, we should not change the status quo. And secondly, sir, also there is a view that the overall controversies of the history should remain in the past, and we should not be backward-looking but forward-looking and move ahead in a developmental agenda rather than focusing on more divisive and distinction-related issues.
So in the Places of Worship Act, is that a blanket injunction, or are there certain circumstances foreseen in which, certain acts would be permissible under the Act?
So one specific injunction was with respect to the Ram Janmabhoomi issue. Secondly, sir, the Allahabad High Court recently brought a specific interpretation to the Places of Worship Act, where they said that the essential religious character of the place is also important. And if the religious character of the place is, let's say, in this case, Hindu, then the issue would not come under the purview of the Places of Worship Act, but would essentially become a title dispute. So considering that, sir, this specific understanding can become an injunction in the Places of Worship Act.
And this understanding has been upheld by the High Court, which is
yes, sir.
Which allowed the survey to proceed. And so where is it now? Where does it stand now?
As currently, sir, the High Court had permitted the Archaeological Survey of India to conduct surveys across the structures of the Gyanvapi Mosque to find the essential religious elements of the place. The reports have not been made public yet. So the issue is still pending in the Varanasi District Court as well as in the Allahabad High Court.
So the survey has started. The ASI survey has begun.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir.
About your optionals, political science and international relations.
Sir.
These were not the subject that you studied in university.
So this is the subject that I studied the same in graduation.
You had political science. Mm-hmm. So in international relations, tell us, if you have to describe the situation today, if you were to give it 2 or 3 main to describe the situation in 2 or 3 words, what would you say? Just give them names. That the world today is orderly, chaotic, whatever.
So the first would be increasing bloc formation.
Mm-hmm.
Second would be conflict. And so third would be multipolarity.
No, that's very good. So multipolarity, which are the poles that you see today, and what do they stand for?
So as we know, so the world has moved swiftly from the bipolarity to unipolarity and now to the multipolarity. The existing poles like the United States and the Western powers continue to hold sway. But as Fareed Zakaria points out, there is the rise of the rest. And so in my understanding, these new poles are firstly India itself as a major economic and diplomatic power. China has been one of the fastest growing countries in the last 2 decades. So Russia has also emerged as a major power, especially after the rise of President Putin. Fourthly, sir, we see that there is also rise of other small powers like Japan, Iran, that also now hold sway in various global geopolitics.
Why do you call Japan a small power? It has an economy bigger than ours. Excuse me.
So Japan is a small power because firstly, sir, its overall economic potential is now being viewed in a terminal decline, especially because of its demographic challenge. It is an aging population with the faltering growth rates. Secondly, sir, Japan is also a smaller power because it was within the strategic spectrum of the United States since last few decades. Now it has started becoming more strategic in its outlook, especially from the defense point of view. But considering these 2 arguments, I called it a small power.
What about the global south? Is the global south a pole? No, it's not a pole.
So, the Global South, in my understanding, is now becoming increasingly important as a pole, especially with the rising voice of the countries of Africa, Latin America, and Asia. We can see their increasing sway, especially from the recent induction of the African Union in the G20. The rise of important minilaterals like the Indian Ocean Rim Association also point to this fact.
But how can it be a pole if it is not able to come together on any major international issue of the day? The major countries of the Global South do not have the same position on Ukraine. They also do not have the same position on the war in Gaza. So how are they a pole?
So the Global South is not a homogeneous unit. They are very heterogeneous with very diverging perspectives and opinions. However, on some of the issues, they have very common interests on which they can cooperate and have cooperated in the past. For instance, the Global South successively faced the problem of vaccine apartheid after the COVID pandemic, where they were devoid of the availability of vaccines that were crowded by the Global North per se. Secondly, sir, the food, fertilizer, and the fuel crisis that came in the aftermath of the Russia-Ukraine war has hit the Global South the worst. So, in that capacity, sir, Global South has cooperated at various forums like the G20, where they have tried to push their voice through members like India itself to raise their perspective.
Let's look at India's neighborhood. How do you see India's neighborhood? Are we doing well in our relations with our neighbors, or are we not doing so well? And if we are not doing so well, why do you think is that in your view? And if we are doing well, why do you think is that the case?
Sir, India has made tremendous strides in developing its relations in the neighborhood, especially after the neighborhood first policy of the government. However, sir, India's neighborhood policy faces various challenges time and again, especially emanating from the domestic politics of some of these countries. From instance, the communist regime in Nepal to that of in Maldives recently. So in my understanding, sir, India has to be very cautious that any of its actions should not be perceived as big brotherly by the neighboring powers, by the neighboring countries. And secondly, sir, we should have a non-reciprocal approach towards our neighboring countries because they are important not just from cultural and civilizational perspective, but also from a very deep-rooted strategic perspective as well.
So this fracas with Maldives, would our actions be seen as big brotherly or would not be seen as such?
So the opinion in some of these countries can be both at times real, but also at times perceived. So my understanding is that the recent reaction by Maldives is more of that of a perception rather than a reality, because India has been very close to Maldives in all of its crises, from the 1988 coup to the 2004 tsunami to that of the 2014 drinking water crisis. However, so some of the local domestic politics, which also is based on fake news as well as some external geopolitical factors like the increasing Chinese influence, has caused these ideations. And I think so India needs to counter these more through increasing people-to-people ties rather than boycotting a very close partner like that of Maldives.
Okay, my last question to you is to ask you to comment briefly on the recent elections in Bangladesh.
So recently, Bangladesh had its elections in which Awami League, that is led by the current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, came to power. So the elections were a bit controversial, with the major powers like US and UK and even the United Nations Secretary General pointing to the lack of transparency in the overall conduct of elections, with most of the opposition parties boycotting and credible reports pointing towards the arrests of major leaders of the opposition parties. However, sir, India, as its state policy, as well as countries like China and our neighboring countries, have accepted and have congratulated Honorable Prime Minister for her victory. In this regard, sir, my own understanding is that India should have a very close relations with the Bangladesh political leadership. At the same time, in a very covert fashion, communicating ways to induce transparency in the overall electoral process.
Well, some commentators have also suggested that India should quietly begin a dialogue with some figures in the opposition as well to plan for the day that politics changes in Bangladesh as it can in a democratic country.
Yes, sir. So this has to be done, however, very carefully, because in this case, the opposition to Awami League in Bangladesh, led by the BNP, is very hostile to India otherwise whenever they have been in power. So, and on contrary, so Awami League has been very friendly towards India, and as well as its strategic concerns in the region. So this action has to be taken with utmost care so that we do not make the current Bangladesh political leadership anxious.